Hello, you rotten little bloodsuckers. Alice Cooper here. Welcome to my nightmare. Welcome to my house and
Welcome to Rock Buzz. This Halloween, it's only fitting to honor the man who turned rock and roll into a haunted house, Alice Cooper. Long before Kiss wore makeup, before Marilyn Manson stirred controversy, or Slipknot downed their masks. Alice Cooper was the original master of musical man. He shows where nightmares come to life, with guillotines, fake blood, and live snakes slithering through his performances. In 1979, Grooves magazine captured the eerie essence of Cooper's journey so far, from his band's humble beginnings to their rise as the ultimate shock rock ghouls. With albums like Billion Dollar Babies and School's Out, Cooper became the Frankenstein of rock, stitching together horror, rebellion, and massive hits. But behind the scenes, Cooper was battling his own demons, and the release of his album From the Inside offered a glimpse into his time spent in a detox center. Now, in honor of Halloween, let's descend back into 1979, a tale of madness, mayhem, and music that defined the norm. Alice Cooper not only made every night feel like Halloween, he is Halloween. He is the legend, the showman, the boogeyman who made rock scream. For a man who managed to turn America's musical tide away from the balladeers and back to hard rock, blend music and theater in a style more elaborate than any previous rocker, and influence a whole generation of teenagers by horrifying their parents, their teachers, and their community leaders. Alice Cooper's tale began in a very innocent way. He was born with a more conventional male name, Vincent Vernier, on February 4th, 1948, in Detroit, Michigan. Although Alice still considers Detroit his hometown, as do many fans in that rock haven, his family, led by his preacher father, soon moved to Phoenix, Arizona. The legend goes that Alice first became Alice to avoid embarrassing his parents with a son who played rock and roll and wore makeup. Young Vince managed to pursue his two favorite extracurricular activities, sports and music, with almost equal fervor. Just as his loyalties today span the gamut from rock to golf, he excelled in track and kept running while on stage as singer with the Earwigs, Spiders, not David Bowie's former group, and Nas, not Todd Rundgren's former group, joining Cooper in covering hits of the early Rolling Stones. Dressed in beetle caps and mod yellow corduroy jackets were his school friends and track teammates, guitarists Glenn Buxton and Michael Bruce, bassist Dennis Dunaway, and drummer Neil Smith. Then Vince decided to try and make a living in rock. After receiving lots of local encouragement for the group's stage antics, his chums became his band, and the Cooper entourage was born. It remained more or less intact until 1974. Quickly realizing Phoenix was not exactly action central for musical hopefuls, the group headed for Los Angeles, calling the band Alice Cooper, a name that sounded as American as Mom, the Flag, and Apple Pie, adopting an attitude that had very little to do with musical expertise and a lot to do with 20th century lifestyles. The group considered itself an ultimate product. Back in 1970, Alice told a reporter, "We didn't have a blues influence. The music that affected us were the saucy theme songs like 77 Sunset Strip and Bourbon Street Beat, and the Thin Man, hip stuff and cool jazz. That was the kind of thing that was going on when we were watching TV." There was just one small problem during the late 1960s and early 70s. America wasn't receptive to a group whose loyalties were technology and satire. The country had barely recovered from unchecked psychedelia and wanted purity, simplicity, and humbleness in its performers, a la Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Alice Cooper was none of these things. The group wore makeup and spangles, long before the New York Dolls. Alice himself might turn up in a dress, further confusing his sexual identity. Very deliberately. Their stage toys included brooms, watermelons, feather pillows which got ripped to smithereens, and the occasional unleashing of a live chicken among the audience, which would give the group unbelievable headaches a few years on. However, some Los Angeles residents became interested in the strange bunch. They acquired an aggressive manager, Shep Gordon, who directs Cooper's affairs to this day, and a new record label, Frank Zappa's brand new company, Straight Records. In 1969, Pretty's For You was the group's debut. Easy Action followed a year later. Both were of limited impact in encouraging musical acceptance for the group. They slucked back to Alice's birthplace, Detroit, where they lived on very little, 5 to a room, and prayed that the Motor City's high-energy tendencies might give them a receptive audience, as it has already done for the MC5, the Stooges, and Bob Seger. Alice Cooper's fortunes took a major leap upward the day ace producer Bob Ezrin came interested in the starving band. The Canadian wizard has a magic touch in the studio with rock bands. He channeled Cooper's lunacy in the force of their songs and guided the recording of a song that would become an anthem for young people. They proclaimed, "I'm 18 and I don't know what I want." The lyrics whined against a relentless rhythm in a 3-minute masterpiece which became irresistible to chanting, swaying audiences. A British rock encyclopedia has called I'm 18 America's equivalent to My Generation. Quite a generous compliment. Aside from being Alice Cooper's first national smash, the song is still considered by many to be their most significant contribution to the pop mythology. I'm 18 and the Warner Brothers album for which it came, Love It to Death, firmly placed Alice Cooper on the side of youth, anarchy, and defiant behavior. Killer, released in late 1971, intensified Alice's threatening image. That nice boy Alice Cooper was pictured dangling from a noose on the album cover, his face a distorted gargoyle. With growing financial success, the group could afford to expand the scope of their stage show, and Alice began chopping up baby dolls, using a live boa constrictor wrapped around his neck, and bringing simulated death to each venue with gallows, an electric chair, and guillotine. He saw his props as theater, but local officials viewed them as immoral and unhealthy, which intensified when the rumor started that Alice was even destroying live chickens on stage. It seems that what the band's early audiences had done to some unlucky poultry was transformed onto the band. Alice protested his innocence in the act again, citing the American way of life as a source of material for the group's concepts. He commented several years after the fury that abated, "We got blamed for doing a lot of violence on stage, but we don't do anything as violent as what's required reading for school. If anybody reads a Macbeth or King Lear, those are bloody plays. We don't do anything as violent as lots of TV shows, so I don't see why we're labeled violent." Of course, to be an American, you have to have a certain percentage of being violent. Our whole system is based on violence, and I'm just putting it on stage. But I don't take it seriously. I'm doing it on sort of a mock level. 99% of the kids don't take it seriously. They know that Alice Cooper is up there having fun. My favorite actors were the villains, Bela Lugosi, Vincent Price. So I emulate that, because for every John Denver, you have to have an Alice Cooper, just to balance. School's Out, the hit single and album from 1972, continued the elevation of Alice Cooper as a gang group leader, loved by his fans, despised by the officials of every town the band came to play. However, underneath that sinister skull makeup and gruesome effects, Alice and the band were just very ordinary, down-to-earth people who had made a fortune with outrage. To 5 guys who'd been eating beans and shivering just 2 years ago, the irony of their situation was not lost. The gradual transformation of Alice Cooper from media monster to media mogul began with the appropriately titled Billion Dollar Babies. Released at the beginning of 1973, the group acknowledged the life they were leading as superstars, figuring, why not make the most of what they'd certainly paid for? Said Alice, Billion Dollar Babies is a reflection of just what the album title implies, that the group's current success has afforded us the freedom and environment to the extent of overindulgence in many fashions, to put together the total representation of ourselves as being the byproduct of the affluent society for which we've come. By this time, the group had relocated to the East Coast, living in the splendor of Connecticut estates, complete with their own mobile studio. Their tour of that spring and summer was equally elaborate, as a 48-passenger jet hauled the group and selected friends between gigs. Painted on its side was an enormous group logo. Despite the presence on the album of 2 more rocking hits, Elected and No More Mr. Nice Guy, some of the band's first supporters accused them of softening their punchy approach for the sake of building a mass following. The criticism was unfair given how long it took them to catch the public's eye, but was also true. The comfortable life was a great pull for the group, and with the loss of their personal frustrations, the band's music became controlled, quieter, and more accessible every time out. You knew the changes were in the wind when Liza Minnelli and Ronnie Spector contributed background vocals to several cuts on Alice Cooper's 1973-74 release, Muscle of Love. As a reporter who covered the New York session pointed out, Alice had less makeup on than Liza and only slightly longer hair than Ronnie. The album became a specific showcase for Alice Cooper, singular, rather than Alice Cooper Group. Inevitably, by the middle of 1974, a year that Cooper took off from touring, the original group decided to leave or were fired, depending on which story one decides to believe. Alice put his new band together from the core of Lou Reed's sidemen, Dick Wagner, and Steve Hunter played guitar, Prakash John bass, Whitey Gland drums, and Joseph Charowski keyboards. On future albums, numbers of session players would be enlisted, although Wagner, another Midwesterner, has won his place as an integral part of the Cooper recording, writing, and production team. Alice made a one-record switch to Atlantic for his 1975 release, Welcome to My Nightmare, a conceptual album which has proven to be one of Cooper's most adaptable works. He played the part of Stephen, a disturbed little boy whose dreams were peopled by horrendous characters. The album follows Stephen through one turbulent night, form which he makes a last-minute escape. And speaking of villainous creatures, the evil Vincent Price, one of Alice's longtime heroes, supplied fiendish narration. The difference between Nightmare and Alice Cooper's earlier Shock Trips became apparent when comparing the songs. Tumultuous crescendos of guitar and drums gave way to calculated hold-your-breath song speak. The album's greatest hit, Only Women Bleed, was a ballad, not a rocker. Alice Cooper was long last a real American product, a night's enjoyable diversion, complete with neatly choreographed death machines. Alice Cooper Goes to Hell, issued in 1976, and Lace and Whiskey in 1977, maintained the pattern he had established with Nightmare. Everybody could enjoy Alice's antics, but no one ever needed to be threatened by them again. The Alice Cooper Show, recorded live on his 1977 tour, summed up the expert presentation of Alice Cooper's image. Back in 1975, when Alice Cooper had just been accepted on his own terms, he said, "I hope the audience realizes it's just a role, because I don't take anything I do seriously." Alice Cooper's new album, From the Inside, appears to take all of his content very seriously, perhaps because its experiences spring from life. Much has been said in passing about Alice's prodigious appetite for beer, a lifestyle that finally caught up with him. Last year, he signed himself into a hospital and stopped drinking for keeps, far from an easy decision. Alice must have seen a lot of time in that hospital, which shocked him as much as his image used to shock audiences. Only this time, he was stared down by reality. With the assistance of Bernie Taupin, Elton John's former collaborator, he recorded an album that blurs all distinctions between Alice Cooper as a performer and as a human being. On that album is a very touching song, How You Gonna See Me Now, a song Alice based on a letter he wrote to his wife Cheryl from the detoxification hospital. Lyrically, From the Inside is the most effective recording made by an illusionist of many years who is now finding enough challenges in playing the game of life. Back now to 2024, Alice Cooper is still haunting the music world with his chilling presence and unmistakable influence. With an incredibly talented band featuring Nita Strauss and other phenomenal musicians, Cooper remains a force to be reckoned with, delivering electrifying performances that blend classic hits with spine-tingling theatrics. Just recently, he joined forces with the Black Keys for their Halloween single, Stay in Your Grave. If that wasn't enough to send shivers down your spine, the upcoming deluxe edition of Muscle of Love promises to reveal even more of the madness behind one of the most iconic albums. As we celebrate Halloween, let's remember that Alice Cooper just isn't a relic of the past. He's a living legend who embodies the spirit of rock and roll, ensuring that every night is a celebration of Halloween. With that, we wish you a happy Halloween, and may Alice Cooper continue to inspire chills and thrills for years to come. Help us out, hit like and subscribe, and we thank you for watching Rock Buzz.